festa de sol e o barquinho a deslizar no macio azul do mar. Tudo é verão, o amor se faz num barquinho pelo mar que desliza sem parar. Sem intenção, nossa canção vai saindo desse mar. E o sol, beijo, barco e luz, dias tão azuis. Volta o mar, desmaia o sol, e o barquinho a deslizar, vontade de cantar. Céu tão azul, ilhas do sul, e o barquinho, coração deslizando na canção. Tudo isso é paz, tudo isso traz uma calma Manhã de tudo meu, você que cedo entardecer, você de quem a vida eu sou e sei, mas eu serei você, um beijo bom de sal, você de cada tarde vã virar sorrindo de manhã. Você, 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 tristeza que eu criei, sonhei, você pra mim, vem mais pra mim, mas só. Tristeza que eu criei, sonhei, você pra mim, vem mais pra mim, você, você, você.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural premiere of the latest Generation Film Contest. I'm journalist Bill Curtis, proud son of the great state of Kansas. Please welcome the president and CEO of the Lincoln Presidential Foundation, Aaron Carlson Nest.
Everyone, thank you to Bill Curtis for that wonderful introduction. On behalf of the Lincoln Presidential Foundation, I'm delighted to welcome you to Chicago for the inaugural Latest Generation Film Contest. Our mission at Lincoln Presidential Foundation is to share the story of Abraham Lincoln's life, legacy, and leadership with all people. And our vision is for a world where freedom and democracy flourish, inspired by the life and work of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln believed that maintaining a healthy democracy required informed, engaged citizens who understood the past and were dedicated to our shared future. In 1861, President-elect Abraham Lincoln posed this question to an audience in Indiana: shall the liberties of this country be preserved to the latest generation? It's a question every generation since the American Revolution has had to ask and answer, and it's the inspiration for this contest. This year's theme, On This Land, encouraged creators to explore and share stories rooted in the history and power of place. Hundreds of young people participated, and their submissions reflect a wide range of topics and interests. We focused this first year on the Midwest, yet attracted interest from across the nation and the globe. Thank you to all who participated in the program, whether through leading or attending mentor sessions and workshops, being part of the Youth Advisory Board or the Film Review Panel, as influencers helping to spread the word, as a key collaborator in one of our 5 anchor cities, and of course, through creating and submitting your films. A special thanks to the award-winning American documentarian Ken Burns, who helped us kick off the contest in August with an announcement that reached countless educators and individuals across the country. We're especially grateful to the Better Angels Society through the Amy Margerum Berg Education Fund. This contest and today's celebration would not have been possible without their generous support. Thank you. To each of our award winners, congratulations. Our panel of experts and reviewers were impressed by the results of your research, place-based storytelling, and creativity. To everyone joining us, thank you for showing up to support the latest generation of documentary filmmakers. And now, please join me in welcoming the Better Angel Society President and CEO, Catherine Malone France. Catherine.
Thank you so much, Erin. The Better Angels Society was so pleased to support the latest generation film contest. We are grateful to the Lincoln Presidential Foundation for making this contest such a tremendous success, and we are delighted to be here today to celebrate a new generation of American history documentary filmmakers. For those of you who don't know us, the Better Angels Society is the only national nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting excellence in American history documentaries in ways that advance education and civic engagement. Our name comes from President Lincoln's first inaugural address, delivered to a deeply divided country on the eve of the Civil War. In that speech, Lincoln spoke of the power of history, what he described as the mystic chords of memory that would bring people together when they were played by the better angels of our nature. We answer Lincoln's call by supporting and commissioning individual documentaries on PBS, by awarding the Library of Congress Levine Ken Burns Prize for Film, recognizing the best American history documentaries every year, and by providing fellowships and mentorships and other resources to documentarians as they create their films. We also are honored to support programs like the Latest Generation Film Contest that give young people the opportunity to make their own historical documentaries. Programs like the Latest Generation are important because they meet young people where they are. You're already very good at sharing stories in the digital world, and we hope to provide you with the inspiration and the training to bring your talents for storytelling to the stories of our shared past. As young people make these films, they're building their skills in critical thinking, research, history, communications, and civics, and I hope having a very good time doing it. And they're demonstrating the power of history that Lincoln spoke about. They are being our better angels, playing those mystic chords of memory to bring us together. So I really want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of the young filmmakers who are here today. Thank you for the creativity and the curiosity you brought to uncovering the history and places around you. Thank you for demonstrating that every place is layered with important stories and that telling those stories through documentary films connects us to each other. You make it very clear that the latest generation of American history documentarians is already hard at work and poised to do great things. Congratulations to all of you. I have to say, too, there is nothing better than getting to spend time with talented filmmakers and the friends and family who love them and support them. So thanks to all of you here, not only the filmmakers, but those who've supported those filmmakers. And now it is my distinct honor to turn things back over to Bill Curtis to announce the winning films. Thank you.
The latest Generation Film Contest winners from the 14 to 16 age group are from Santa Fe, New Mexico, Magnus Scheip, Beyond the Midwest category winner for 35,567 UPIC stories. From Chicago, Illinois, Deepti Koduru, Madeline Kim, Noah Kim Cohen, and Selassie Afram. Creativity and Storytelling winner for Rock Revolutionaries, the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band. From Plainfield, Iowa, Jackson Naiman. Third place winner for On This Land, Dr. Norman Borlaug's Lasting Legacy. From Chesterfield, Missouri, Rohan Deshpande. Second place winner for Buttons, Baby Teeth, and Bombs, the St. Louis Baby Tooth Project. From Wichita, Kansas, Isaac Gorgeous, first place winner for The Life of Ike.
So this is the Reindeer Herders love song, and if you want to dance, just say it.
Our music is based on our traditional music, our traditional dance songs called yugak. And so that's the foundation that kind of drives us and inspires the music. We still do traditional dancing, of course, in the performances as well, because it's important for us to show to people what like the traditions from the Yupik people, you know, the Yupik area of Alaska, and our dance tradition. And so when we do that, we just kind of transition to more of the contemporary sound, which is a mixture of, I would say, funk and soul. We are inspired by many genres of music. We kind of take people on a journey musically, and we've been performing for 28 years.
And this next one was composed by Austin up here. You want to explain a little bit about it?
I taught one of my, well, actually, in a dance class up in the university up in Fairbanks, I taught a dance class in the afternoon, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the campus at the university. And some people like to stay up all night, and they look pitiful the next day, and whatever my student was doing, I put into the song. All day I want to sleep, and I keep falling on my face, and I want to lay down. Whatever she was doing, I serenaded to her like that. It became a song, and we're gonna sing it from your style, and here it goes.
Or we left Alaska the end of September. And we started in North Dakota, then we went to South Dakota, we went over to Minnesota, and then went over to Montana, Washington, D.C., New York, and now we're here in New Mexico. And we've been on the road for about 6 weeks. And in this tour, I'd say my favorite place is New Mexico, because it feels like home here. And I shared yesterday, we did a show yesterday at the Crane Festival in Albuquerque. And one of the things I shared in the show is that New Mexico is the state and the place and the area that we've traveled to the most outside of Alaska. And besides some of the, like Europe, because we did, Europe is also based like Denmark. In the United States, it's New Mexico. So it feels like a little bit like coming home, But otherwise, in our history, the 28-year history of us performing, we've traveled all over the world, Europe and South America, Asia, just all over. And it's been an awesome journey to be able to share our language, share our culture with people around the world, because there's only about 40,000 Yupik people in the world, and they know the ways because they've been surviving and living in these ways for generations and generations, and learning from each other.
And their wisdom will become your compass in life, and
also a cultural armor that will help you to be resilient in the 21st century.
Have you ever heard of Bikini Kill, the Bangles, or Dum Dum Girls? These were all extremely popular feminist rock bands in the 1990s and early 2000s, but they weren't the first female rock bands. So where did they actually come from? One of the first feminist rock bands that changed rock music for all women and inspired all the rockers that came after it was the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band.
During the era of second-wave feminism, the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band became one of the first and most influential female rock bands of all time. The band influenced rock and roll culture by expressing their opinions through songs on how rock music was completely male-dominated. The Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band marked a turning point in history by introducing a completely different style of music. The band was unprecedented in the 1970s as they were the first band to write music that inspired women to pursue their own dreams. Their music addressed and directly tackled real issues of sexism and misogyny within the rock industry. The band's unique approach advocated for women's rights in their songs. And unlike other feminists, their music focused on microaggressions against women. With their impacts, it is clear that the band truly opened an everlasting path for all female musicians.
The feminist movement during the 1970s was called second wave feminism. This movement came after World War II, when women were told to be the perfect suburban housewives who got married young and did not want to pursue a career. As detailed in the famous book, The Feminist Mystique, women felt unfulfilled and extremely unhappy, so they decided to fight for their place in society. While first wave feminists were mainly straight white women who fought for legal rights, second wave feminists brought attention to the domestic violence and workplace inequalities for all women of color and representation. This movement successfully gave women the right to hold credit cards, the right to apply for mortgages, and outlawed marital rape. And during this time, in Chicago, a feminist union was formed. This union was called the Chicago Women's Liberation Union. The Chicago Women's Liberation Union informed women about serious topics such as career rights, abortion, and self-defense. They told stories of women around the world. The union was also a program to help women deal with the struggles that society forced them to endure. The Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band was a part of their arts program. The members included founder Naomi Weinstein, Susan Abad, Sherry Jenkins, Pat Matthews, Fania Montalvo, and Susan Prescott. Weinstein, the founder of the Chicago Women's Liberation Union, felt that rock culture talked down to women, so she took action by starting a feminist band that wrote songs to empower women.
Naomi, who was the brainchild of the band and the visionary, she was a classical piano player, and she was learning how to play rock and roll. And everybody else was coming from all different kinds of music, but we wanted to pick rock. Naomi's message was she wanted to be able to reach every 14-year-old girl and spread the message that, you can do anything and, prepare yourself, because it's a rough world out there.
She worked with another rock band, their sister band, called the New Haven Women's Liberation Rock Band. They wrote and recorded an album together called Mountain Moving Day. This album was everything rock and roll should have been like.
The rock and roll industry was traditionally sexist and demeaning, but the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band defied this stereotype. While rock musicians were typically white men, the band was made up of young women who made music specifically for a female audience. Some smaller bands and solo artists like Hart and Stevie Nicks gained fame for their music, but an all-female band had never been as big of an activist as the CWLRB. Weinstein described traditional rock music of that time as, "This wasn't Beatles' playful women affectionate songs. These were vicious boy bands."
They were songwriters, but they were kind of focused around men. Their lyrics were focused around their relationships with men.
She went on to talk about how her band would defy this. "My band would have women playing instruments, and women singing about how smart, strong, funny, and hip we were, and how we would only have sex when we wanted to. Thank you." And the band believed in including women in music instead of alienating them. "We have to change the total experience of the rock performance," the band writes in its culture paper. "We have to involve our audience as equals rather than insult them, respect them rather than degrade them, play for them rather than at them, acknowledge that our audience is our life, our understanding, our spirit. We keep the house lights on them. We rap a lot with them. We do theater for them and with them. We pass out lyrics, teach them songs, and have them sing along." The band expressed these views in their music, where they sang,
"You bring me down, it makes you cool. You think I like it, you're a goddamn fool."
The band and the second wave feminist movement both faced backlash from society. Although second wave feminism received more support than first wave feminism, there were still opposers. When women pushed for equal rights in the Equal Rights Amendment to gain support in courts, there were women like Phyllis Schlafly and Mitch Schechter who said that women wanted to be protected, not equal. They argued that it was a blessing for women to sit at home all day with nothing to do and no support to pursue their ambitions. There was even a movement called the Men's Liberation Movement, which talked about things like how sexual assault laws were restricting male freedoms and the patriarchy forced men to work too hard. Although the movement did bring attention to important topics such as paternal rights and letting boys show emotions, parts of the movement were extremely anti-feminist, and it was part of destroying feminist progress. This movement later transformed into a more toxic masculinist movement called the Men's Rights Movement. And when feminist rock music started becoming popular, male rock stars like Frank Zappa said, "I don't think that there's a girl around that would fit in with what we do." This opinion carried towards many women in the music industry. Weinstein said that they had heard that a fraternity had threatened threatened to destroy the event. New Haven's vocalists sang out, "Put your shirts on, sisters, we're in grave danger." "No," they shouted back, "we won't, we're free." This happened again and again and again in different forms in the 3 years that we performed. Even some women thought female presence in rock music was unnecessary or made women look stupid. However, despite all of this backlash, feminists and the CWLRB preserved and won great victories no matter how small they might have seemed.
The rock music that the band performed can be traced forward to the Riot Girls movement when feminist rock music became insanely popular, and even further forward to the fourth wave of feminism when women of the 2010s and 2020s got to listen to stars like Miley Cyrus and girl groups like Blackpink dominate the music industry. Pat Matthews described their impact as, "Everybody in the room at the time knew that something important was happening. It wasn't just like, boy, this is fun. It was like, something is changing and we are writing this and we are helping it move." The Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band innovated feminist rock practice, laying the groundwork for women's music festivals such as Lilith Fair. This is also similar to modern music and media. For example, in the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, the main character Kat Stratford listens to Bikini Kill and wants to start her own rock band. She wouldn't have been able to do this without the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band making it something. From 1970 to 1973, the band defied sexist rock stereotypes, advocated for the elimination of societal stigma against women, made sure women knew they could do anything they wanted to, and used music as an outlet to reach different audiences that traditional feminism did not reach. They were the Chicago Women's Liberation Rock Band.
The first and foremost problem in this crowded and overcrowded world is one of food.
As world population skyrocketed during the 1940s and 1950s, U.S. agronomist Norman Borlaug developed a disease-resistant crossbred wheat variety to address world hunger. Known as the father of the Green Revolution, Borlaug shared his approach for over 5 decades in Mexico, South America, Africa, and Asia. By increasing food production and self-sufficiency, Borlaug successfully expanded humanitarian and scientific frontiers to save over 1 billion lives, for which he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Norman Ernest Borlaug was born on March 25, 1914, in the small town of Cusco, Iowa, on a family farm started by his grandpa, Nels Borlaug, a first-generation American of Norwegian immigrants. Early in life, he had to work on the farm, which taught him the meaning of hard work and instilled his love for agriculture.
So his favorite song is called the Iowa Corn Song. People were divided and very wary of others of different religion, different ethnicities. They spoke different languages at home, immigrants. But every morning, the school teacher had them all stand up and sing about the one thing they had in common, being from Iowa.
Additionally, his high school wrestling coach instilled in him an attitude of never give up, fight as hard as you can, and struggle through tough times. After high school, when increased mechanization in farming allowed Borlaug's family to manage without his labor, and when the start of the Great Depression left his family with little money, Borlaug was lured by the promise of a wrestling scholarship to the University of Minnesota. There he studied forestry and met his wife, Margaret. After graduation, he settled into a job working for the U.S. Forestry Service. However, Borlaug's mission in life quickly changed early in his career after attending a lecture by Professor Alvin Stackman, where he learned that wheat rust was killing crops in Mexico and Asian countries, which resulted in widespread food insecurity. Intrigued by the experience and motivated to make a difference, Borlaug returned to the University of Minnesota to study plant pathology. Immediately following his graduation, Borlaug was hired by the Rockefeller Foundation and sent to Mexico in collaboration with their government to create a stem rust-resistant wheat variety. Once settled in Chapingo, Mexico, just outside of Mexico City, Borlaug and his team began testing wheat seeds used by the locals. they planted over 110,000 seeds and monitored them to see which ones displayed resistance to wheat rust. When harvest time came, they discovered only 4 seed types survived the scourges of rust. Borlaug took these seeds north to Sonora, where they could grow crops out of season when plants in Chipingo couldn't, due to lower altitude. He called this shuttle breeding. This was very beneficial because he could get more results per year. After harvest in Sonora, Borlaug took the seeds that survived back down to Chipingo and planted those seeds again. After 4 years of shuttle breeding, Borlaug's wheat crops had a much higher survival rate, to the point at which stem rust was almost non-existent. However, because there was so much wheat at the top, the wheat would fall over, ruining the crop. Borlaug's solution to this was to crossbreed his stem rust-resistant wheat and a Japanese dwarf wheat to make the stems stronger. It was easier said than done. It took Borlaug 7 years and over 8,100 crosses to achieve a durable and extraordinary, high-yielding, strong-stemmed wheat variety. After he developed this variety, he shared it in countries throughout the world, such as Turkey, Indonesia, Afghanistan, Tunisia, Pakistan, India, Brazil, and many more Asian, South American, and African countries. Borlaug himself traveled overseas to these distant locations where he taught farmers the methods for watering, fertilizing, and harvesting their wheat crops. Because most of the farmers were poor, their country's governments put up irrigation systems and paid for the fertilizer. With all of this new information, countries went from importing millions of billions of bushels of wheat to becoming self-sufficient in wheat production in a year and a half's time. In the spring of 1968, Borlaug heard that India's farmers' silos were overflowing with wheat. After that harvest, India broke its all-time harvest record by 150%. Scientists all over the world were inspired by his work, so they created high-yielding rice, corn, and other commodity variants. Then one day, Margaret got a call, saying that Norman had won the Nobel Peace Prize. "This must be a mistake," Borlaug commented, even as reporters were showing up in the field. Finally believing it was true, he went on 2 news conferences. At the ceremony, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize and had a bunch of good things said about him. "We did not award the Peace Prize to the scientist, Dr. Borlaug," said Elise Lyonnaise. "We awarded it to Dr. Borlaug, of whom the scientist is just one well-integrated part." Additionally, Dr. Borlaug won numerous other awards, including the National Medal of Science, a Congressional Gold Medal, and as well had a statue unveiled at the U.S. Capitol in his honor. Even though Norman Borlaug achieved so much, he was still upset because he knew he only bought the world about 20 or 30 more years on Earth and would never win the ever-going war against hunger. "Lurking in the edges of my consciousness, I can see a point at which an over-burgeoning humanity becomes too much for Mother Earth to bear," Borlaug proclaimed. According to Borlaug, we need to keep making agricultural advancements, like his advancement, to feed the ever-growing population. Today, the population is growing rapidly, just hitting 8 billion in late 2022. And even though Dr. Norman Borlaug died in late 2009, the world still leverages his research methods to feed the burgeoning population.
Perhaps the greatest challenge that human beings have ever had is this: can we sustainably produce enough nutritious food to feed that 9.5 to 10 billion people, while at the same time dealing with the challenges of climate change or climate volatility, and while dealing with and preventing pandemic animal diseases and plant diseases, as well as human diseases?
Furthermore, Dr. Borlaug's legacy lives on through the World Food Prize organization that he started to honor and support other scientists whose innovations are changing the face of agriculture worldwide in their efforts to eliminate food insecurity. From a tiny town in northeast Iowa to the far reaches of the globe, where he freely shared his ideas for the betterment of humankind, Dr. Norman Borlaug's humanitarian spirit continues to positively impact the world in which we live in today.
Our love is stronger every day. Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho. So come along and join the song, several 100,000 strong. As you come, just sing this song. Yo-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho. We have from Iowa, take double the land. Joy on every hand. We have from Iowa, away. That's where the tall corn grows.
Yesterday, a shaft of light cut into the darkness. Negotiations were concluded in Moscow on a treaty to ban all nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater.
On July 26, 1963, the nation watched as President John F. Kennedy delivered his address on the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Such a momentous feat in diplomacy, as well as changes in public perception and scientific research, came about due to one relatively unknown movement, the St. Louis Baby Tooth Project. In the 1950s, the Cold War had both the US and USSR vying for nuclear supremacy. Flocks of people sought to view US nuclear tests. This so-called atomic tourism surged on April 22, 1952, when over 30 million people from the safety of their homes watched the first television broadcast of a nuclear explosion. At the time, science and the public were two separate spheres. Science was concentrated among scholars, and information rarely trickled down to the general population. A group dedicated to addressing these issues was the Committee for Nuclear Information, or CNI. Founded in April 1958 in St. Louis, Missouri, the CNI promoted information about radioactivity. Individual explosions were known to cause health effects in their blast radius, but CNI founders wondered whether radiation spread further. No evidence existed to prove or disprove this, so the CNI pressed for a new study. Around this time, Dr. Erman M. Kalkar found that strontium-90, a radioactive byproduct of testing, accumulated in the same ratio as calcium. He suggested that since children absorb calcium at high rates, their baby teeth would also accumulate strontium-90. Baby teeth could be easily collected. If many contain nuclear residue, then widespread radiation accumulation would be proved. With the method found, the question lay in where to start a study. Most US nuclear testing was done in the Southwest. However, winds brought much of the radioactive material to the Midwest, contaminating dairy through hay and grass. A preliminary survey by the US Public Health Service found that St. Louis produced milk had record high levels of strontium-90, making the city ideal for a new study. The St. Louis Baby Tooth Project was initiated in December 1958, led by physician Dr. Luis Reese and biologist Barry Commoner. The CNI were the public face of the operation. They enlisted volunteers who collected teeth from schools, libraries, and other organizations. Hundreds of thousands were collected, so much so that St. Louis Mayor Raymond Tucker proclaimed a Tooth Survey Week in 1960. The project quickly became a national movement, with other cities issuing their own tooth collection surveys. Every kid received a participation button.
What? You would wear your button. You know, it was like, you wanted that bad.
Miss Nina Seavey, a participant in the study, describes their experience donating her teeth to the survey.
You felt like you were involved in something important and that you were involved in science. And that was super amazing.
By 1970, over 320,000 teeth were collected. Each tooth was packaged in envelopes and sent to the Washington University School of Dentistry, where a special research team would look for strontium-90 content. They concluded that from 1945 to 1965, strontium-90 levels in the baby teeth of children had increased 50-fold, in correlation with nuclear tests. For the first time, high amounts of radiation were found over long distances and decades of accumulation. While the Baby Tooth Project made astounding revelations, it faced opposition from many. With the Soviets increasing their testing and technological programs, many associated a US response with a Cold War arms race victory. Even amongst scientists, the idea of banning nuclear testing seemed counterintuitive to patriotism. A 1958 debate between Nobel Prize winner Linus Pauling and fellow physicist Edward Teller displayed this disparity.
If we stay strong and if we continue to be sure of ourselves and know and let the Russians know that we will defend ourselves. I think that is the best way to peace. But all this means that we must be prepared.
Despite this opposition, a growing number were taken aback by the Baby Tooth Project's findings. Change was imminent.
I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
President Kennedy campaigned against nuclear testing, but switched policy due to increased Soviet testing. Nevertheless, he pursued negotiations to minimize nuclear fallout impacting future generations. The 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis provided the opportunity for such negotiations. Both sides also adopted the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, which discouraged the possibility of nuclear war. Simultaneously, the Baby Tooth Project emphasized that radiation amounts across the US were accumulating fast. The study's initial results were given to President Kennedy by a scientific advisor. The president contacted Dr. Louis Rees and used the project evidence as impetus for the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Overground nuclear testing was now banned in the US, UK, and USSR. The Baby Tooth Project marked a change in Cold War relations. At the Cold War's onset, the US and USSR were focused on military buildup. This was replaced by a greater emphasis on environmental concerns following the Baby Tooth Project's findings, using politics as a tool to better humanity.
But the achievement of this goal is not a victory for one side. It is a victory for mankind.
The Baby Tooth Project also influenced public perception. It and the CNI aimed to provide citizens with accurate information about the dangers of nuclear weapons. People no longer felt isolated from radiation effects. In the context of environmental movements, they were willing to question their connection between patriotism and nuclear testing. Scientific research practices were also affected by the Baby Tooth Project. The CNI issued pamphlets detailing the study's work. Dr. Barry Commoner and other Washington University scientists increasingly voiced their findings in public articles. This resulted in the scientific community taking a larger role in societal issues. People reacted to scientific ideas, and the public, rather than scholars, became the face of scientific advancement. Following a crowd is easy, to turn against it is hard, but redirecting the entire crowd is the hardest. The Baby Tooth Project demonstrated the latter by transforming citizen science advocacy, changing public perception of nuclear weapons, and leading to test ban treaties. Who knew that baby teeth could beat bombs?
They called him Mike. He was raised in Abilene, Kansas, and grew up to be the 34th President of the United States of America. Of course, I'm talking about the famous Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was born in Texas in 1890, but after only 2 years of his life, his family moved to Abilene, Kansas, where he would spend the next 19 years of his life in that town growing in character. That town is where this boy would grow up to become the General of Army and the 34th President of the United States of America. Now, I live really close to Abilene, Kansas, so this story feels really close to home, and it was very interesting to dig deeper into such an important man's life. In Dwight's early life, he was very interested in exploring the outdoors and loved hunting and fishing. He also had a deep interest in history books, especially military, even though his mother was strongly against the war.
Wait, can I just finish the page?
He later decided to attend West Point. Even though it upset his mother, she did not overrule his decision. I got in, yeah.
You're going to give it your all at your time here, you understand?
Yes, sir. He graduated from West Point in 1915 in the middle of his class. He then got stationed at Fort Sam Houston in Texas. He met his wife while he was stationed there, and they got married less than a year later. Once the U.S. entered World War I, he swiftly asked for an overseas assignment, but instead he got stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Though he never saw the violence of that war, he was later assigned to France and got promoted to Brevet Lieutenant Colonel, where he was in charge of training tank crews. so his amazing training definitely was a big deal in the war. Now, Eisenhower had a big responsibility in World War II after being assigned to the General Staff in Washington. He had the responsibility of making major war plans against Japan and Germany for just over 6 months. After Eisenhower's success in World War II, a visiting politician suggested that he should possibly think about running for president in 1948. Over the next couple years, a lot of people tried to encourage him, but he kept rejecting the idea. As the election got closer and closer, everyone thought this would be his only chance, as Republican Thomas Dewey was projected to win and most likely serve 2 terms, making Eisenhower likely too old to run after his expected 2 terms. But Eisenhower never did run for the 1948 election. But that isn't the end of this story. As for the 1952 election, Eisenhower gave in and decided to run as a Republican. Eisenhower defeated the other Republican nominee, Robert Taft. He started campaigning full-time in June of 1952. His campaign was known for his famous yet simple slogan, "I like Ike." Eisenhower had a landslide win against the Democratic runner Stevenson, with Eisenhower getting 442 electoral votes versus Stevenson, who only had 89. Not only that, but he served a second term after another landslide of a win with a rematch from the previous election. Now, Eisenhower did great things as president, things so important that they still affect us to this day. Just to start, there's the interstate highway system. Yes, Eisenhower signed the bill to build the huge interstate highway system that we use every day. This was a huge improvement for America and likely helped boost the economy and definitely helped a lot with transportation. Eisenhower also created the Advanced Research Project Agency. Now, you're probably confused with that string of words, but it's basically one of the first forms of long-form communication between devices limited to government use. This was essentially the first stepping stone towards the internet as we know it today. Eisenhower also made the branch of the government that we all know and love, NASA. It was created in the Cold War to help combat the Soviet Union's first orbital satellite that they had just sent out. He also helped structure a lot of our country's defense through branches like these. So it's safe to say that Dwight D. Eisenhower made quite an impact on America. Now, I was lucky enough to be able to come here to the Dwight D. Eisenhower Museum and get some of the shots that you saw here throughout his life, and I want to thank them for that. I also wanted to thank them for the opportunity that I was able to get to have an interview with the directors here at the museum. Hello, today I'm here with Dr. Todd Arrington, the director of the Dwight D. Eisenhower Museum in Abilene, Kansas. Thank you for joining me today for a couple of questions. How are you?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. It's an honor to have you. So I think that we all know Dwight D. Eisenhower for his time in the military and as president. But in your opinion, what do you think is the most influential thing that Dwight D. Eisenhower did after his time as president?
I would say he, of course, took on the role of sort of an elder statesman, and he made himself available to his successor, who, of course, was John F. Kennedy. They did talk from time to time. Kennedy did seek Eisenhower's advice on a number of things, including somewhat famously the Bay of Pigs invasion that was such a disaster in April of 1961, the beginning of Kennedy's presidency.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that. The other thing, second and final question, can you explain more about the architecture of the Dwight D. Eisenhower Museum and the ways that the architecture of the museum tie back to his Kansas roots?
Yeah, Eisenhower wanted the buildings and wanted this whole campus to really reflect Kansas. So there are a lot of design elements here that do reflect that. One thing that is really interesting is the limestone that's used here was quarried in Kansas, so it's a Kansas limestone. He also was very particular about the building on the campus here that we call the place of meditation. That is his final resting place, Mrs. Eisenhower's, and also their firstborn son who died young. And he really wanted that to be a beautiful place and a place that allowed people to quietly reflect on the values and the things that have made America the nation that it is.
Yeah, I noticed all that while I was there. The architecture there is just beautiful. And I wanted to thank you again for letting me film at the museum and for taking time out of your busy day to answer a few questions to help us understand more about this great president.
My pleasure. Thanks for looking into Eisenhower. He's a great person to study and to spend every day with, as you see here over my shoulder.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you very much. He unfortunately passed away in March 1969 from a heart failure at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. at age 78. His body was soon placed in a funeral train for his final journey to his hometown in Abilene, Kansas. And to this day, he is still buried in Abilene, Kansas, on this ground.
Please welcome these filmmakers to the stage with a round of applause. Latest Generation Film Contest winners from the 17 to 19 age group are from Moline, Illinois, Mariam Umar, Ileana Ambries, Karena Zemek, Bailey Callahan, Delasia Dixon, Anaya Dixon, and Gabrielle Welch, Original Approach to History winner for Extraordinary Girls, Stories from the Underground Railroad. From Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, Quinn Blagan. Depth of Research winner for What They Taught Us, How Grassroots Diplomacy Shaped the Cultivation of Milwaukee Neighborhoods. From Custer, Wisconsin, Jennifer Omernick, third place winner for Board by Board, How the Movement of One Church Constructed a Community's History. From Eden Prairie, Minnesota, Sasha Allen, second place winner for Turning the Tide, Glen Lake Sanatorium's Crusade to Conquer Tuberculosis. From Lawrence, Kansas, Mia Rasmussen, first place winner for Kansas City Jazz, A Frontier for Black Success.
My name is Margerum, and there's one thing we all have in common. We all have a story. Ruby Bridges was only 6 years old. Malala and Anne Frank were only 15. Some people forget just how important girls are. But we matter and our stories matter. When you think about the Underground Railroad, you might think about a train. But it was actually a network of people from the south escaping to the north. Did you know that Illinois was part of the Underground Railroad, including the tiny town of Geneseo, Illinois? Did you know that girls were a part of the story?
So, can you tell me why it was called the Underground Railroad?
At the time of the movement of the abolitionists, railroads were crisscrossing across the United States. And so people knew the names of conductors and all the names of helpers that were for the railroad. So they decided if they used those same terms and called it underground, that those would be the terms that they would use as slaves to let them know without being found out again, because it would sound like you're going on a train to Boston or to Cleveland or to wherever.
What were the challenges of helping the slaves escape?
Not getting found out, and not having your family torn apart, not having the man of the house being put in prison. Those were the biggest challenges. If you were slaves on the Freedom Trail and you were coming to our hiding space, you would not be standing in another home. This house was not built until 1867. And if you look at the store, you would say, why has that got a glass panels in it? And it's because it says, we have nothing to hide, but behind this door, we have a really big secret. You would be standing in prairie grass and thicket, as tall as you are or higher, and it was a hiding space so that you could secretly get in here without being caught. Would you like to join me?
Yes. So how were young girls and women involved in the Underground Railroad?
Mostly through the church, and that was also a way to escape people realizing what they were doing. And everybody thought they were having quilting bees, but actually they were cutting quilts and cutting blankets to make the little strips for the slaves' feet. These are the two rooms where the slaves usually slept when they came here. And little Georgiana Richards, the little girl that lived in this house, who we estimate is probably 6 or 7 years old, it was her job to take the pitcher and the bowl and go and get nice warm water and some soap and scrub their feet, because the slaves traveled from the south to the north through the riverbeds, through the rivers, through the thicket. Their feet would be all torn up and have lots of sores and blisters on them. So when they got here, they wanted to make sure they cleaned them out real good, and then they would put salve into the wounds and the sole of the foot. And the women of the Congregational Church would cut little wool rags and wrap their feet in these wool rags, and as they slept at night, that salve would go into those rags. And if you've ever shrunk a wool sweater, you know what it's like. It would become really crusty at the bottom and shrink up, and that was their new pair of shoes. This is our hiding hole. There was a brick wall all the way up to this window. In the back, there was a wall that went off a brick wall and another window so that you could see to the outside. This addition was added on later, where you see the pink. And this was really important because they would turn these little turnkeys that are here, climb in between this hiding hole. The beams are cut away. People were bounty hunters and looking for the slaves. They would see the window, could look through, and they would think, oh, they're not hiding anything. Or if they came down here, they would look through. And there used to be an old curtain, but it rotted away. Some of the stories that we have here are really important. There's a man and a lady and a little baby, and the baby cried and cried and cried and cried, and they were so afraid they were going to be found out that they were harboring slaves in the basement. So Mrs. Richards went out to her herb garden and she picked some herbs. They fed them to the baby, swaddled the baby, put the baby up into the rafters, and the baby was in there a day and a half and never cried. So we all wonder, what did they give the baby, and was it okay? We'll never know.
Why would you say it's important to have a museum form of the Underground Railroad?
It's part of our genocidal heritage, and it's part of the heritage of the United States at the time of slavery. And it needs to be known that there were people here that were here to help break all the chains and that believed that slavery was wrong and that all people should be created equal and all people should have equal rights. So when this house came on the market, our historical association said, this is what we have to do. We have to make this public, and we did.
Hey Angie, I found this quote on the wall.
This is one of my favorite quotes. Freedom is a result of daily choices by ordinary people. Can we all say that together? Freedom is a result of daily choices made by ordinary people.
They violated our rights, and we couldn't move where we want to, and we gonna march till hell freezes over.
The result of racism can be found in the housing policies across the U.S., which led to the 200-day marches in Milwaukee. This debate and grassroots diplomacy by Milwaukee's youth in the 1960s impacted the city, state, and country. Their diplomatic steps included taking the issue to the streets, which can still be seen in America today. In 1963, an advertisement paid for by the Milwaukee Board of Realtors was posted in the Milwaukee Journal, stating, quote, "Today, the rights and freedoms of an individual American property owner are being eroded. This endangers the rights and freedoms of all Americans. It is self-evident that the erosion of these freedoms will destroy the free, enterprising, individual American," end quote. This ad referred to the open housing movement, which started to take shape in the 1960s. The reasoning for this open housing movement is evident in the information released to the middle and upper class white Americans during this time. Some white Catholic priests in Milwaukee were against open housing as well. Father Russell Witten described open housing as not open, but forced.
If an individual is approached by some individual, regardless of color, race, or creed, they ought to have the right to refuse if they so desire.
In 1866, a Civil Rights Act was passed, stating that, quote, "Citizens of every race and color shall have the same right in every state and territory in the United States to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property." However, 100 years later, political loopholes and the moral beliefs of the white majority created racially biased housing policies, triggering housing discrimination protests in Milwaukee. Formed in 1947, the Youth Council embraced Father Grappi, a local priest, as their strategic ally. As it fought for justice, the NAACP Youth Council grew to be an organization embodying young people from all over Milwaukee, coming together to fight for equality. Realtors made the claim that property values would drop when African Americans moved into a neighborhood. Just the opposite came true. Data shows property rates rose 2 or 3 times its appraised value when sold to African Americans. They paid too much for their housing and were forbidden to move out of the Central Core. A national report in 1965 affirmed that 98% of Milwaukee's Black residents lived in the Central Core. This is a result of intentional government action. The declining of mortgages, white flight, and propaganda used by realtors all played a part in the discriminatory housing crisis in Milwaukee. Intending to pressure the city's Common Council, the Youth Council picketed the houses of multiple aldermen, which fell on deaf ears. On August 23, 1967, Grappi and the Youth Council announced their next diplomatic move, marching to the South Side. The Youth Council began marching on August 28, 1967. As the march made its way down the 16th Street Viaduct, also known as the Mason-Dixon Line of Milwaukee, 8,000 counter-protesters met them. In an attempt to reduce the uproar beforehand, the NAACP Youth Council informed white residents of the South Side they were marching, but the route was kept confidential. The peaceful protesters chanted and sang, but were met with violence, some even taking bricks to the head, many going home that night, beaten and bloodied. This did not deter them. The Youth Council met nightly, debating strategy for the next day's march. Although it is now known as the 200-day march, a timeline had not been set. The choice of allowing young people to lead this movement offered new debate tactics and a diplomatic mindset.
Are we gonna die for our freedom? Yeah!
The intentions of these marches were to cast discrimination in a public spotlight, and to achieve this, the Youth Council marched every night with the intention of visibility. Many Youth Council members' greatest debate, however, was within their families. After losing her mother at the age of 3, Pamela Jo Sargent was raised by her grandmother, who saw firsthand the effects of violent, racist attacks in Arkansas.
She tried to stop me from going, but I used to climb out the window and run up the. I lived on 6th and Clark, and St. Boniface was on 11th and Clark. And so I would go up to my room like I was going and do my homework and climb out the window and go up to the march.
The preachings of Father Grappi used the Bible to teach concepts such as justice, nonviolent disobedience, and redemptive suffering to the council. Difficult debates came from outside their meetings, and it took diplomatic steps from the youth in order for them to arrive at the march at all. Eventually, the debate on whether to march or not was won by the youth. In the end, older generations marched alongside their children.
They were protesting about the fact that they were Black Americans and they were not receiving the rights as Black Americans. They were not only studying history, they were making history, you see. And this was doing something psychologically to every Black child that participated in that demonstration. He was telling the world and he was telling himself that not everything is right in America.
April 4th, 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. April 5th, 1968. Cities all over the country break out in riots. With the Youth Council's leadership, Milwaukee marched peacefully. More than 15,000 people took to the streets, making it one of the biggest memorial protests in the nation.
The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
The 200-day marches are an example of the time it takes to create change and the diplomacy it takes to make that change. Within this movement and era, two legacies arose. The legacy of the diplomatic mission of youth marchers is seen today through the student protests of social justice issues. The legacy of housing discrimination, however, can still be seen through the segregation in Milwaukee today. Banks and realty companies were sued on the claims of redlining and discrimination. The impact that the Milwaukee NAACP Youth Council had on America is inescapable. This was the starting point for a fair housing ordinance passed in Milwaukee on December 12, 1967, 4 months before the Federal Fair Housing Act was passed on April 11, 1968. The legacy of the marches have never been as prominent as they are today. An activists group in Milwaukee, known as the People's Revolution, marched for 200 days straight, protesting the George Floyd shooting. This protest tactic was based solely on the marches of 1967 to 68. The 200-day marches, a diplomatic and peaceful movement, are a piece in the arc of the moral universe, and this arc continues to bend towards justice today.
Welcome to Polonia, Wisconsin, a tiny town with a wealth of history. Sacred Heart Catholic Church is the heart of this small community and the largest organization in the local area. But what if I told you, if not for the determination of the Polish immigrants who lived here over a century ago, this church and the community that sprung up around it might not have existed here at all. Board by board, how the movement of one church constructed a community's history. In the countryside, almost 10 miles northeast of Stevens Point, Wisconsin, sits a crossroads. In the late 1800s, the area was christened by the Poles as Poland Corners, and indeed, many locals had Polish ancestry. Others were from a mix of different European cultures, such as German, Irish, and Norwegian. Many of the immigrants in the area were Catholic, and therefore petitioned the Roman Catholic Church to build a local parish to support the population's religious needs. St. Martin's was erected in 1858 to serve the entire community. However, differences in tradition and language created barriers as the Irish and Polish Catholics worshipped differently. It was not long before the Poles requested their own church. They got their wish around 1864. St. Joseph's was built less than a mile down the road from St. Martin's and only a few hundred feet from Poland Corners, today the crossroads of Highway 66 and County Road J. In traditional Polish communities, the church is often a center of social life. However, another staple of life back in Poland was the tavern. Like the community's church, taverns served as a hub of community conversation, and the perfect place for business is a crossroads in the center of town. Thus, 3 taverns sprung up directly on Poland Corners, adjacent to St. Joseph's. This arrangement became quite problematic for churchgoers. Men who had spent 6 days farming and logging with limited social interaction were suddenly tempted with socializing at the tavern instead of attending Sunday worship. With the taverns buzzing while church was in session, brawls and arguments in the neighboring taverns spilled outside, often disrupting church services. Father Buzinski served at St. Joseph's for only 2.5 years before deciding to leave. After his resignation, 4 priests went through the parish during the span of just 1 year. Finally, the order came from the leading diocese to cease church services at St. Joseph's. The Poles were left without their own parish for years. Eventually, around 1870, Father Joseph Dabrowski was assigned to the area. However, remedying the situation at Poland Corners proved to be a challenge. Dabrowski tried to negotiate, asking the taverns to close Sunday mornings, but the owners would not comply. Dabrowski found it impossible to conduct church services next to the taverns. He was compelled to come up with another solution. Dabrowski turned to Hannah McGreer, a local wealthy farmer. He bought a parcel of land from McGreer about 1.7 miles east from St. Joseph's Church. The agreement included a condition where only parish buildings could be built within a quarter mile of the church, guaranteeing a buffer zone that St. Joseph's did not have at Poland Corners. In 1872, Dabrowski and parishioners disassembled St. Joseph's Church piece by piece, much to the outrage of the tavern owners and some locals. Over the course of a few weeks, the wooden frame was moved and reassembled on the hill Dabrowski had bought from McGreer. Dabrowski named the place Polonia, which directly translates to Little Poland. As an immediate result of the church's relocation, a lawsuit was filed against Joseph Melcher, the bishop of the Diocese of Green Bay, and Joseph Dabrowski. The lawsuit was put into action by a man named Thomas Kuklinski, who served as the prosecutor. He was a tailor and one of the first Polish immigrant business owners in Stevens Point. However, his relation to the tavern owners at Poland Corners is unknown. The handwritten local lawsuit, dating back to 1872, has become almost illegible due to time and printing capabilities. Contained within is a summons for relief page, along with pages describing court and lawyer costs, and details about the case. It is likely that through the lawsuit, tavern owners asked for compensation due to the church's relocation, claiming that Dabrowski and Melcher wanted to ruin their businesses by taking away their patrons. Sources indicate that the lawsuit was lost at both a local level and when appealed to the Wisconsin state courts. With the relocation of the church, the area deemed Polonia suddenly found itself with a place to worship, and Dabrowski worked hard to open a school for students. He petitioned for Polish religious sisters to come to the area to help, and the Felician sisters made the long voyage across the Atlantic and set their first fruits in America right in small-town Polonia. The parish was not without difficulty, however, as over the course of 50 years, 5 massive fires consumed the parishioners' hard work. At least one of these fires, according to local legend, is said to have been caused by arson. Many locals still suspect the tavern owners from Poland Corners. Despite the opposition and devastating fires, Sacred Heart Parish has flourished to this day and continues to serve as one of the oldest rural Polish parishes in North America. The school, which remains in session, has educated thousands of children. The Felician Sisters, after setting roots in this community 150 years ago, continued to spread, creating more schools and convents across the country. After the Felician Sisters moved their mother house to Detroit, the Sacred Heart Convent became an orphanage which took in dozens of young boys over the course of about 40 years. Polonia as a community has expanded greatly. What was once only farmland changed significantly over the years following the church's construction. Starting in 1876 with the first store, businesses and homes were built close together, creating a center of town in the decades that followed. Ellis, the area where Poland Corners stood, has a much different history. St. Martin's in Ellis shut down long ago, and only a few businesses and homes remain along the highway. The old Poland Corners is still well-traveled and holds 2 taverns, but despite the benefits of the crossroad location, the area has not produced a sizable town. Not like Polonia, where the streets are lined with homes, where a children's park was recently built, and where a church picnic or the annual Christmas parade can bring in crowds of hundreds of people from around the area and beyond. A variety of businesses are prospering throughout Polonia today, and these businesses include the 4 popular bars that are up and running, acting as hubs of life for the community. Turns out, all you need is a little distance in order to keep both the taverns and the church successful. The movement of one church 2 miles east of where it originally stood built an entire town. Polonia is a strong community of people who have grown together, worked together, and lived together. This one parish has helped expand the influence of the Catholic Church and changed the landscape of Portage County, Wisconsin. The parish has not only shaped the lives of all who live here, but of countless people who have spread out across the county and beyond state lines. The moving of St. Joseph's may have originally been the result of bar brawls, but it ended up influencing the course of history for this local area and leading to an entire community of people living right here in the thriving town of Polonia.
In the early 20th century, tuberculosis was the world's leading cause of death. This devastating disease caused untold suffering and claimed millions of lives across the globe. But it was a small town in Minnesota that would play a vital role in creating a new holistic treatment model and ultimately in finding a cure to this global scourge. Glen Lake Sanatorium pioneered new tuberculosis treatments, services, and prevention methods. Along with the Mayo Clinic, in the 1940s, it conducted groundbreaking drug trials, marking the beginning of our triumph over tuberculosis. In the early 1900s, tuberculosis was rapidly spreading throughout the U.S. People who could afford it moved away from the close and unsanitary living conditions of cities and tenements in hopes of avoiding or recovering from the disease. Minnesota's cold climate and landscape of fresh air, woods, and lakes made the state an ideal destination. Unfortunately, the droves of tuberculosis patients flooding in began spreading the disease to healthy residents. In response, Minnesota launched a major sanitation and hygiene campaign, and in 1913 began creating a statewide network of sanatoriums to isolate and treat patients. Amid acres of woods, farmland, and raspberry fields southwest of Minneapolis, construction began on Glen Lake Sanatorium. In January 1916, in the middle of a blizzard, the first patient arrived. Most sanatoriums in the U.S. were basic, small, and understaffed. But Glen Lake's new superintendent, Dr. Ernest Mariette, had a grander vision of a large, self-contained community where all patient needs could be met. Glen Lake provided patients with the basics they needed to heal: rest, sunlight, good food, and light exercise. Treatment started with intensive bed rest, transitioning into limited activity. Although the scientific benefits of vitamin D were not yet known, Glen Lake knew heliotherapy had a positive impact and prescribed sunbathing in the fresh Minnesota air. Additionally, while nutrition was still an emerging field, Glen Lake became one of the first hospitals to employ a licensed dietitian. Glen Lake was also unusual in its strong emphasis on rigorous patient training and sanitation habits to prevent contagion. When the disease couldn't be managed solely with these basics, doctors turned to surgery. Lung collapse to kill bacteria living inside the lungs, and immobilization of the lung to limit its movement and promote healing were the most common surgeries practiced at this time. But Glen Lake's priority was not just treating disease. Uniquely for that time, Dr. Mariette embraced a holistic approach to patient care, rooted in treating the whole person. Tuberculosis was an incredibly isolating disease. Once diagnosed, people's entire lives were disrupted. They were taken away from their homes, families, and jobs and confined to facilities.
When you did get to see your parents, you couldn't touch them or get a hug or anything from them, so that was very difficult.
Creating a vibrant sanatorium community became crucial for patient recovery and preventing depression.
We had a happy childhood here. It was just like being in your family. I don't think we even understood that the nurses were on duty and left. It was just, we saw them every day and there was a continuity and they were like family.
To support mental health, Glen Lake hired a social worker, which was unheard of at the time. Furthermore, while most sanatoriums had segregated wards, Glen Lake was integrated, helping include the already small population of minority patients in the sanatorium community. To stay active and positive, patients could read, listen to music, and do occupational therapy, including arts and crafts. Social events fostered togetherness, with visits by vaudeville acts, musicians, and celebrities. The sanatorium also had its own patient-run radio station and newspaper, which helped isolated patients feel more involved and built camaraderie. To help patients grow and learn, Glen Lake offered vocational classes to learn hard skills and high school classes to earn a GED. Glen Lake also helped ex-patients transition back into society, offering them light work at the sanatorium to earn money. As demand increased, Glen Lake grew rapidly. In 1925, a children's tuberculosis camp was established adjacent to the sanatorium in the town of Eden Prairie, emphasizing play, work, food, and rest. Over time, along with sanatoriums in New York and Colorado, Glen Lake became a hub for doctors and medical professionals from all over the world to train and study the disease. It developed a strong reputation as a pioneer in tuberculosis treatment and became the first sanatorium in the country and the second in the world accredited by the American College of Surgeons. While Glen Lake had stronger patient outcomes than many, thanks to its innovative care and treatment methods, tuberculosis still had no cure and was often fatal. The tide turned, however, in 1943. After decades of research, Rutgers University scientists discovered a chemotherapy drug called streptomycin and quietly offered it to the Mayo Clinic for guinea pig testing. Results were so successful that, in 1945, scientists decided to test the drug on patients. Glen Lake was chosen to conduct these trials because of its extensive lab facilities and quality patient care. Along with Mineral Springs, a small sanatorium near Mayo, Glen Lake became the first in the world to administer streptomycin to patients, stepping onto the global stage. Miraculously, the drug saved the lives of numerous terminally ill patients.
I was very ill, probably very close to death, and just in the nick of time, I got the drug streptomycin, and obviously I survived, and I'm very happy about that.
In 1947, streptomycin was approved by the FDA, revolutionizing the world's fight against tuberculosis.
It was not until the chemotherapy drugs, streptomycin and so forth, came out that we began to have the real ray of hope.
In the following years, the drugs isoniazid and para-aminosalicylic acid also joined the fight after successful trials at Glen Lake and other institutions throughout the 1940s and 1950s. By the late 1960s, with effective medication, surgeries, and treatment, plus better hygiene and detection, there was little need for tuberculosis sanatoriums in the U.S. Glen Lake was turned into a nursing home in 1961, and in 1993, due to deteriorating conditions, it was demolished. The land that had been home to so many sick people for so many decades is now a public golf course for the Minnetonka community. Glen Lake Sanatorium may be gone, but its legacy remains powerful. Today, tuberculosis rates in the U.S. are near an all-time low, although the disease remains a threat in much of the developing world. Scientists continue to strive to find new treatments, inspired by the legacy of sanatoriums like Glen Lake that helped push the boundaries of disease treatment and prevention. Despite its unassuming small-town origins, Glen Lake worked tirelessly to innovate, test new drugs and treatment methods, and collaborate with medical specialists from around the world to eradicate this deadly disease. Perhaps most importantly, they illustrated the importance of caring for the patient's spirit as well as their body and never giving up hope.
How did Kansas City become a frontier for the evolution of jazz? What is unique about Kansas City jazz? Is it the swing, the attitude, the location? Kansas City became known as the Paris of the Plains, for it was the center of entertainment. Musicians came from all over, wanting a taste of that success that Kansas City promised. This new and thriving place was run by Tom Pendergast, a political powerhouse at the time. Pendergast was seen by many as corrupt, picking political candidates that were connected with crime, fraud, etc. He made it possible for so many nightclubs and dance halls to run in the era of Prohibition, for he did not enforce the Prohibition laws. In fact, he was connected to a liquor company. Under his rule, it is easy to see how nightlife thrived in Kansas City. One area of Kansas City that really thrived is the neighborhood of 18th and Vine. The traveling individuals looking for jobs settled down here and built homes and businesses. It flourished into a city within a city. Jazz music started to blossom within this community, evolving into its own type of jazz. The sounds of jazz could be heard emanating from the clubs and dance halls. The streets lit up all throughout the night. Why was all this groundbreaking music confined in one neighborhood? Well, it was due to the discriminatory practice of redlining. The word redlining comes from the practice of literally drawing a red line on a map, marking the, quote, hazardous neighborhoods. This was done to systematically refuse services to people based on their race or ethnicity. A map of Kansas City from the 1920s shows this practice in use. The areas marked in red were described as having, quote, undesirable population, or an infiltration of it. They recommended lenders to, quote, refuse to make loans in these areas or only on a conservative basis. We can see the systematic racism developing also in the area descriptions. The description for area D25, which is where 18th and Vine is located, is characterized as a, quote, far-flung area where values were shot several years ago. This section is, quote, a typical colored area, ragged in every respect. Now let's compare that description to the description of area A8, which is known as the Country Club District, an area that, quote, embraces the best of the far-flung and has exclusive subdivisions. These exclusive subdivisions were created by developer J.C. Nichols. Jesse Clyde Nichols started developing real estate in 1904. He created these residences that were for a specific demographic. Most of his houses were very expensive. Not only were his houses catered to the wealthy, they were also built on highly restricted covenants. They had many rules and regulations, that of which included restrictions on who could buy the houses. This restriction was included in every covenant created by J.C. Nichols. But despite the efforts to redline and segregate Kansas City, jazz was still a frontier for black success. The jazz bands in Kansas City provided music to dance and socialize to, and they were the pride of the black communities. Organizations like the local chapters of the NAACP and the Urban League and other local organizations hosted charity events. They were held in dance halls, and guests were encouraged to come and help the organizations. Host organizations would hire different jazz bands to come and play, which also helped them receive exposure. This is how one of the first successful jazz bands, the Benny Moten Orchestra, gained traction. After playing in many gigs and becoming more and more popular with people traveling to see them play, the band became the first band from Kansas City to record a phonograph. This caused the band to become even more popular and also spread the Kansas City style nationwide. Succeeding the death of Benny Moten, many of his band members started their own bands and were also very successful frontiers in the jazz movement. The most famous of them was William Count Basie, who started the Count Basie Orchestra. The band became infamous when some of their performances were broadcasted on the radio nationwide. There were many other examples of success coming from Kansas City, such as the George E. Lee Singing Novelty Orchestra, Mary Lou Williams, Big Joe Turner, Julia Lee, and of course, the most famous jazz musician from Kansas City, Charlie Parker, who grew up in Kansas City and became known as perhaps the most famous alto saxophone player of all time. Charlie Parker was one of the leaders in the bebop movement, a style of jazz that started in Kansas City, emphasizing fast movement and complex chord progressions. It was unique for the time, with a main emphasis on rhythm. It was a contradiction to the other types of jazz. Instead of sticking to the composed score, there was a lot of room for improvisation. An example of this is Charlie Parker's Co-Co. This style developed from what was called jam sessions, where musicians improvised for hours. There were no rules, they could play without any restraint. Joe Jones, a pioneer for jazz percussion, said about the jam sessions, quote, "Nobody ever got in anybody's way. Nobody ever had to point a finger and say, 'You take it now, you take the next chorus.' Any place in Kansas City where there was a session, the guys would just get up on the bandstand and spiritually they knew when to come in. They just felt which one was coming next." Kansas City bebop allowed the musicians the freedom of expression, and it forever changed jazz. Today, we can see the traces of both jazz and redlining in Kansas City. People still go to listen to live jazz in clubs such as the Blue Room, the Reno Club, the Green Lady Lounge, and many other places. And jazz is still a big part of Kansas City and its community. Along with this, redlining continues impacting the community of Kansas City. Previously redlined communities have less access to higher-paying jobs, public transportation, educational attainment and opportunities, parks, and government funding, along with less home ownership rates. Steps have been taken to remedy the effects of segregation in Kansas City. They put grocery stores in more communities. The name of Troost Avenue, a dividing line of communities, is being petitioned to change to Truth Avenue. Several things that have been named after J.C. Nichols have been changed, including one of the most famous fountains in Kansas City. There have been grants given to the Jazz District to open the American Jazz Museum and the Negro League Baseball Museum, preserving the history. And the community is being educated about the history of the city and how it needs to be changed. How did the frontier of redlining influence the frontier of jazz in Kansas City? Historically, redlining policies were one way that racial segregation adversely influenced communities. The 18th and Vine Jazz District was directly affected by redlining because developers would only sell or rent to black people within these districts. This area became a cultural center of the black community from which Kansas City jazz developed, spreading the innovative Kansas City sound across the world. Even though systematic racial segregation threatened the success of black communities, Kansas City jazz thrived and became a frontier for black achievement.
Please welcome these filmmakers to the stage with a round of applause. latest generation film contest winners from the 20 to 22 age group are from Salina, Ohio, Carter J. Hellworth, Excellence in Storytelling winner for The Barn is Burning. From Appleton, Wisconsin, Riley Killian, third place winner for Grandpa Noel's Gift. From Chicago, Illinois, Cherishay Barr, second place winner for Hip Hop is a Home. From Hays, Kansas, Ryan Shookman, first place winner for the Garden of Eden documentary.
Nestled in rolling fields and beneath clear skies is what many may consider the heart of our nation, the American farm. A standing testament to generations of hard work, dedication, and care for the earth is this particular operation, Hellworth Farms. This family-operated dairy farm rests in Mercer County, which is by many measures the top agricultural county in Ohio. This is a special community of people who work the land and understand the importance, sanctity, and community involved in doing so. But even on this idyllic farmstead, all tranquility can be shattered.
I'm standing in the framework of something great. Surrounding me are the wooden, steel, and concrete guts of what is soon to be a milking facility. To contrast, here is the skeleton of a milking parlor. A once bustling building that was in many ways the heart of this operation is now a hollowed out memory, with bones of charred timber and stained tile. I'm Carter Hellworth, the youngest of 6 children raised on this family farm. Today, I hope to illustrate to you the undying spirit of American agriculture and the struggles to push forward in one of the most essential yet demanding industries in the world.
I'm Garrett Hellworth, owner of Hellworth Farms. The night of January 30th, 2024 was when our tragedy began. My son Caden went out to check the temperature, make sure the milk was cooling. Looks in the door to see the temperature, and all he saw was smoke. He called me out, I went out, and then things got real. I mean, we've had things, cows get out and stuff like that, but this was real.
Not a single milking has been missed on Hellworth Farms for decades.
It has to be done every 12 hours, period. Cows got to be milked.
The place where cows are milked was gone in a matter of hours.
If you can't milk cows...
So not only was the farm's function gone, but hundreds of cows needed immediately moved off the premises. This was a true farm owner's nightmare.
This was going to put us out.
The problems were solved, and they weren't solved alone.
I was just overwhelmed with all the people that came together and helped us think, because a lot of neighbors helped, our milk hauler helped. Made some phone calls because we had to stash 220 cows somewhere and had to be milked within the next 6-8 hours.
Through the connecting bond of agricultural sweat and tears, they knew the graveness of the situation.
The cards and letters, and I'm praying, you can't believe how many people were praying for us. I think Mercer County ran out of donuts because everybody's sending us donuts. It's incredible. And I feel myself I need to be more giving, because if we were going to tear the parlor down and rebuild it the next day, they'd have been there to help, but we just did not know what to do. I guess at that point, we didn't know what we were going to do yet.
Farms evolve to keep pace with the rapid moving world.
The challenge of it. Sometimes it absolutely stinks. You can't do what everybody else does, but especially dairy farming, it really straps you down. I think it's just a challenge we like.
Garrett Hellworth used this disaster not as a stop sign, but as a catalyst to forward momentum. Garrett, with the help of his oldest sons, had been eyeing robotic milkers for some time as the step into a future of efficiency. With a situation that required change dropped at his feet, the farm made the move.
February decision time, March deciding on the robots, April deciding on the building, April 30th we started building. Fortunately, within the community of Mercer County, we had our builders built some projects for us before it could fit us in, and they found an electrician, a plumber, everybody pulled together, we got her done. I'm very impressed with how the robots work.
Agriculture has a tall order on its hands. It's got to keep up. Experts predict the world may house 10 billion people by 2050, and the share of those working in agriculture continues to shrink. That's 10 billion lives that will need food, clothing, and resources from farmers.
I could produce nothing and you wouldn't even know it, but if everybody said that, we'd have nothing, so what we do is important.
The modern farmer holds on.
It's important we get out with other farmers, so you can't have that same mentality.
For someone on the outside, it can be hard to understand agriculture.
Especially as a young guy, doesn't get to go out on weekends and stuff like everybody else. He really needs to interact with other farmers so they do realize he's not the only guy doing that.
To understand the hours put in before the rest of the world wakes up and after they go to bed.
I mean, you're tied to it. You're really tied to it.
To understand the science and difficulty and wonder involved with caring for the earth and its creatures. Pelworth Farms is looking to the future. So is our strong ag community. It's a congregating zone of those who know how to work, know how to solve problems, and join together when a lot of those two things need done. But the truth is, although my community is special, maybe it isn't wholly unique. Because across the entire country, many farm communities provide for the world, labor tirelessly, and bond over the joys and discomforts of an agricultural life. Through thick and thin, through fire, or through rebirth, agriculture moves forward together.
Shoveling snow and making snowplows. However,
David, come here, baby.
Riley likes the Christmas season best of all. Yeah, and this is Riley.
I am Grandpa Noel. I have written a book of stories about our 24 grandchildren. It all evolved out of a process when our oldest granddaughter was 5, and my wife invited her into the family baking for Christmas activities. I decided it would be nice if I also did something for our granddaughter for that Christmas. I finally decided to write a story where she would be the lead character, and I used the basis for cooking Christmas cookies as the foundation of the story. From there, it took on a life of its own.
The message in the story had been received.
So by the time I came around and got to the curious stage, my parents were just beyond telling stories about what their lives were like. I mean, they grew up during the Depression, so they had obviously a much different life than we experienced, and yet I knew very little about that. And I felt badly that I knew so little about that. I didn't want the same thing to happen to our kids and grandkids. I wanted them to know that we were human, we had our foibles, but we also had wonderful relationships. I think the relationships that become so important in passing along family traditions, and that's also another reason why I felt the grandchild's stories are also part of that growth and relationship to the rest of the family.
That was another one of Grandpa's great stories, but this time it was about Wiley. And this is all the other stories in it.
Family is all important in the sense that we are all part of this grand structure, but we are a unique portion of it.
Let me see, really, what is it?
Not only our kids, but our grandkids, and how they all evolve in this whole process of growing up. I tried to set a benchmark and said, okay, at age 5, which again is a stepping stone, kindergarten, a lot of other things begin to change. Let's do something special in that year. And that's kind of what evolved into the Grandpa Noel stories to the grandchild who had turned 5 in that year. And it just has grown beyond that to a point where it's just a part of our tradition.
And we didn't have a story for Noel.
Mommy snuck in check last night.
I did it this morning.
Or no story, Noel. Well, we're gonna look. We're gonna look. Let's go. I see one for Thea. And I see one for Noel. All right. Alexis, Noel, and Nicole, all dressing warmly for the brisk fall breezes. Their hair was being blown by the wind, but they were not paying any attention to the weather. They were searching for a special stone, one that would capture the sunlight and sparkle like the rings on their mother's finger.
You tend to lose an appreciation for the child growing up because you're also involved in day-to-day activities and you're focusing on the trees and not the forest. With our grandkids, we have an opportunity to step back and just enjoy them. Enjoy their growth stage, enjoy where they are. It's all been just part of the process of family, and yet without the day-to-day issues that arise in every family. The grandparent is a unique role. I think Irma Bombeck said it best when she said, you know, if I had known how much fun grandparents are, I would have skipped the kids process or kids phase.
Haunted by memory, inspired by sound, ignition for love, a flame full heart. Hip-hop is a home. You write it, you spit it, you live in the image. Hip-hop is the black man's clinic. Black women feel it, the young kids live it. We dance with rhythm, a hopeful spirit, yet prideful image. Hip-hop is a home. Right through pain, listen to maintain. Hip-hop is more than fame. got into hip hop when I was young because my uncle had a studio in the basement in my grandma's house. So they always used to make music.
That's so close just to hate up on me. You want doors to open, but I'm looking for keys. Give a man a fish, I need a pole, where's the sea? Do the bullshit, tell me what it's gonna be. If we destroy the building, let the neighborhoods feed.
I did make a song with my uncle when I was little. It was really bad, but it was still fun. I do feel like my family relation to music is generational. Like I said, I've seen my uncles make music as well as my little cousin from making his sonic beats.
We like get in the studio and we just play around, go back and forth. Like we working on some stuff.
And I had this like beat worked up and my dad came in, he was like, ooh, that sounds pretty good. Let me rap off of that.
But we go back and forth for words and then I see where he at and then he see where I'm at. We really like starting to learn each other's styles. My niece's father, Anthony Barr, he took me to my first hip-hop show when I was 16. Like, they snuck me through the back door. I wasn't supposed to be there.
My uncle always wanted to make music. I've heard songs that my dad made, and shouting out my uncle, I know that music is a big way to connect each other. They really had that in common, using music to express themselves and to show love to each other. I know my dad, he made music when I was a little girl, and I know that was a way to express himself and write his story on a track.
Walk across the ocean, you can fly across the sky. You can climb the highest mountain, but you'll never reach my high.
I remember one time it was me and my mom. My dad had came over our apartment. It was just me and my mom staying together, and I was little. And I really wanted to sing, and I was really nervous to sing in front of him. I was like, Dad, I can sing. And he was like, sing for me. And I'm like, no, I'm scared. So he had me go in the bathroom and close the door, and I sung, and he was just like, that was good. I like that. So we always bond over things like that. So I think I got that from him. Allgale Gardens is where my family is from. It's where my grandfather met my grandmother, where my dad met my mom, where my uncles met my aunts. Everyone met each other in Allgale Gardens. It's pretty much the projects. It's just a little community of Black people who come from struggle, and within that struggle they create art. I feel like the music and stuff, it can cause some issues, but it also stops a lot of issues, like a lot of people collabing, making music. Music in general, even with hip-hop, it brings that happy feeling out of everyone. So whenever you're having a family reunion or a barbecue, you don't have a silent barbecue or a silent family reunion. You always have some type of music on, and it boosts the spirits of everyone. Everyone needs a release, whether that be music, poetry, listening to music, drawing, doing hair, any form of art. It helps you release emotions that you hold within. I think the more that you hold in emotions, you become stressed or you become angry, and I don't think anybody should be like that. I had some friends who were not the best people to me, just using me for money, not having my back, getting on the internet and just talking bad about me. I also was going through a heartbreak at the same time. All of that kind of took a toll on me, and I just wrote how I felt. I was angry, I cried, and I just sat there and I recorded. That's how the story goes. Niggas break your heart and don't trust these hoes. Get to the green, count up your dough, stay low, bro. It was tension release. Those aren't your friends. Those aren't the friends that you were meant to have, and that wasn't the relationship you were meant to be in.
Not only that I just use it as a way in order to dispel negative thoughts, I also use it in order to help with my positive thoughts as well, so I can not just like have that energy stuck. I just like store it into something so I can build something off of that.
Sometimes I just zone out. If I'm just feeling some type of way, I just listen to instrumentals and play around. It's like it'll take you out that whatever mood you feeling, any type of negative mood or down mood, it uplifts your spirit.
My freshman year of high school, my dad was killed. He was shot and he was killed. Uncle David, he did take me to go see his body before, everything happened. I use music to heal me from all of the past trauma and the grief. If I could talk to my dad, I'd probably say thank you. I just want to say thanks for making a cool daughter, and I know he would be proud of me. Oftentimes I beat myself up because I feel like I should be further in life, and I want to make both my parents proud. I want to make my uncles and them proud, like they're my father figures. I just want to say that your daughter did a lot to be 22 years old, so.
Lucas, Kansas is home to many bizarre art installations around town, from the mosaic-covered public restroom to the rock sculptures at Miller's Park. But there's one place that stands out from the rest, not only because of its strange political and religious structures, but because this place shaped the town of Lucas into what it is today. With a population just over 300, Lucas is a very small town. It's unable to support its own high school, and there's only a single gas station in town. Yet, despite this, 10,000 tourists come every year to see its main attraction, the Garden of Eden.
The Garden of Eden is hard to describe in a few short sentences. It is a historic property built 100 years ago, and at the center of it is a log cabin made out of stone. Surrounding the stone log cabin are 3-story concrete sculptures that are almost like political cartoons in concrete form.
The man who built the Garden of Eden is Samuel P. Dinsmore, a former Civil War soldier who moved to Kansas in 1888 to farm. Arriving just a year after Lucas was founded, he was a major factor in developing the town's businesses. After 17 years of farming, Dinsmore bought the property that would eventually become the Garden of Eden.
This is your neighbor doing something. I don't think anybody was upset about him building things, but if you've ever built something in public, or if you've ever done anything in public, you know there's that one guy who's gonna come by every day and just give you a hard time. Because Dinsmore was sort of a firebrand and loved debating with people, there was a lot of that back and forth with his neighbors about what the meaning was behind the sculptures.
The first structure to be built on Dinsmore's new property was the limestone house. He envisioned the house to look like a log cabin, but instead of wood, it would be made of limestone. Not a single door or window in the house were the same size, and it featured elaborate moldings and baseboards. Dinsmore had built such a unique home that people traveling through Lucas would often stop by to take a look. Looking to capitalize on the attention his house was already bringing in, Dinsmore began constructing a few sculptures outside of his house that displayed images from the Bible. This included Dinsmore's interpretation of God. It showed Adam and Eve within the Garden of Eden and Abel slaughtering his brother Cain.
I don't know that he would have called himself an artist, but in the early ads that he put out for the Garden of Eden, he called it the most unique home for the living or the dead. And he did call them sculptures. So when you call something a sculpture, I think that means that you know that you, as the maker of that sculpture, might be an artist.
Dinsmore continued building more structures on his property. However, as time went on, the structures Dinsmore built turned from biblical to political, representing his views on politics and society. Dinsmore was a part of the Farmers Alliance and was an avid supporter of populist ideologies. He believed that railroads, trusts, and monopolies were taking advantage of the common man, and these organizations formed to combat their influence. Many of the citizens of Lucas, however, were Republicans who disagreed with this viewpoint.
I think Dinsmore was really building this as a social critique. He intentionally put into his sculptures some of those ideas that could have been contentious, that really was poking at some other people. So that, when you say in a rural town, can get some pushback. And he enjoyed that pushback. He really was pushing for people to think about what they believe and figure out for themselves, is this true or not?
Local opinion of the Garden of Eden ranged from wanting to pass a city ordinance banning public art to completely running Dinsmore out of town. Yet, despite this, Dinsmore was a Civil War veteran and did lots of business in Lucas. Many townspeople decided that, although the artwork was strange, it was mostly harmless and attributed Dinsmore's behavior to his old age. At this point, the Garden of Eden had become a tourist attraction, drawing in people from all across the region who wanted to see the house with the strange sculptures. He welcomed the attention and even led visitors on tours of the property while the artwork was still in progress.
It's a good intersection of art and tourism. So he was using it as this political statement, and to get that statement to resonate, people needed to come see it. So the outside eyes were very important to Dinsmore in showing them what he's created, be able to plant some seeds of ideas.
Dinsmore continued building various sculptures on his property until he was 86 years old. However, it wasn't the people of Lucas that had put into his work, it was his own body. His eyes had begun to fail him, and he was unable to continue building. Dinsmore died in 1932, and for a few years afterwards, the Garden of Eden continued as a major tourist attraction. But after the property was sold to new owners, the site fell into disrepair. Eventually, in 1967, the property was bought by Wayne and Luella Nagley.
The wife of that couple said, no, we've really got to restore this. We have to honor this. We're not going to keep it as a rental. It needs to be Dinsmore's again.
When the couple reopened the Garden of Eden in the 70s, they began sending out promotional materials to bring awareness to the site. Dinsmore's work was beginning to be recognized by both artists and the general community as a one-of-a-kind place. In the 1990s, Lucas opened a grassroots arts center downtown, spurring other artists like Dinsmore to make Lucas their home.
So they opened in the 90s, and after that, artists found not just one place, but two places. And they had a site they were caretaking, so there's three places. It might not always be a direct effect of the garden. It might be that secondary effect of somebody who didn't move here because of that, and then got another person to move here.
Much of the art around town would be considered unusual to the average person, often utilizing everyday objects as a centerpiece in the art.
Because of the Garden of Eden's out there nature, everybody accepts this as normal. So it's not strange for somebody to decide, you know what, I'm going to make a bunch of cats out of farm implements and put them in my front yard. That's not odd here. That art of the everyman's everyday experience, using what you know and what you have to work with to make an embellishment that is maybe not functional, but is serving the purpose of making you happy. If we're just making art to be pleasant, then it's decoration. I'm more drawn to art that makes you stop and makes you not take things for granted that you pass by every day. That to me is what I'm drawn to as an artist. And as a cultural resources director for the Garden of Eden, I feel that same spirit here.
Please welcome these filmmakers to the stage with a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. On behalf of the Lincoln Presidential Foundation and our partners at the Better Angel Society, we appreciate all of you joining us here today to celebrate the inaugural winners of the latest Generation Film Contest. We look forward to your continued support, and to all of our filmmakers, we can't wait to watch you keep making history. Thanks, everyone, again, and have a wonderful day.
Congratulations to all of these talented filmmakers.